Chloe, what do you think of this wedding dress? Isn't it gorgeous? My adoptive sister, Felicity, sat next to me on the sofa, flipping through a bridal magazine. She was pretending to be genuinely invested in helping me choose a dress when her eyes suddenly darted toward me, a glint in them that sent a shiver down my spine. That's when I realized I was reborn. Felicity grabbed my hands, her face a perfect mask of goodwill. Chloe, let's get married together. It'll be a double celebration, twice the joy. I already consulted a master, and he said the day after tomorrow is an auspicious date. Since you and your fiancé were planning on getting married this year anyway, we might as well do it together. I've already bought more than enough for my wedding, so you don't have to worry about a thing. Just use my stuff. If you need anything else, I'll get it for you. That's what sisters are for, right? In my past life, I had nodded and agreed. Felicity had rushed around, spending her own money and energy to prepare everything for me. She was so exhausted that she only got a moment's rest an hour before the ceremony. Seeing her work so hard for me, I was deeply moved. Who said you needed blood to be real sisters? I was touched beyond words. But I never could have imagined that getting married on the same day as my adoptive sister would be a trade. My health for her happiness. I inexplicably contracted a nasty STD and became infertile. My parents and in-laws then conspired to sell me to a lawless region in northern Myanmar, where I was abused by dozens of men until I died. I shuddered at the memory. The kind, gentle mask Felicity wore hid a man-eating demon. Felicity was adopted. My parents took her in because she was born on the exact same day, month, year, and hour as me. They had been on a trip to the countryside when they came across her. Her name was originally Felicity Siong. Her parents had died in a car crash shortly after she was born. My parents pitied her, and seeing the cosmic coincidence of our shared birthday, they felt it was fate. They brought her home, and because she was taller than me, she became my older sister. Her last name changed to match ours. Thanks to my parents' wealth, Felicity and I attended private schools, wore the best clothes, and had everything we could want. My parents spent over $1.5 million on her study abroad program alone. Later, in college, we both found men we wanted to marry. We graduated last month, and both of us were planning our weddings. I never thought that the sister we had invested so much in would turn out to be a venomous snake, plotting my demise. In my last life, when she suggested we get married on the same day, I was so moved I instantly agreed. But after the wedding, I couldn't get pregnant. A foul odor clung to my body, and my skin broke out in itchy red spots. I felt drained, a shell of my former self. I thought maybe I just wasn't showering properly, but a trip to the hospital revealed the horrifying truth. I had an STD. When the doctor announced the diagnosis, my parents and husband, who had come with me, recoiled, covering their mouths and noses in disgust. So that's why there was a constant, smelly discharge. It was a disease. Young women these days have no self-respect, the doctor said, his tone dripping with contempt. They'll do anything for money. My husband's face twisted with revulsion. Slap. A set of 5 red fingerprints appeared on my cheek. I can't believe you're that kind of woman, he spat. We're getting a divorce. It's over. My parents, ashamed of the public humiliation, disowned me on the spot. Meanwhile, Felicity's life was perfect. She got pregnant shortly after her wedding, and her mother-in-law was overjoyed, catering to her every whim. She was glowing, looking healthier and more radiant than ever. She walked with a new spring in her step, as if she was walking on air. She claimed it was all thanks to the baby, that her child was a lucky charm. In an instant, Felicity's status skyrocketed, not just with her in-laws, but in my family as well. After my parents cut me off, they treated Felicity as their one and only daughter. My father, with a grand gesture, gifted her a $10 million villa. They were one big happy family. And I became a social pariah, scorned by everyone. After I was diagnosed, my husband decided to get one last use out of me. Once my STD was treated, he, my parents, and my mother-in-law sold me to northern Myanmar, making another tidy profit. It was there I learned the meaning of a fate worse than death. My spirit was completely crushed. But then Felicity showed up. Shaking her head, she paid my captors even more money, saying my punishment wasn't severe enough. She needs a harsher lesson to learn her place, she said. My parents, who had always had such high hopes for me, now saw me as a stain on their reputation. They stood by and let Felicity destroy me. In the end, I was tortured to death by dozens of sick men. After I died, the spirits of the afterlife appeared to take me away. But my heart was filled with injustice. I had only ever been with my husband. How could I have contracted such a terrible disease? I knelt before the spirits, screaming that I had been framed, refusing to go with them. They exchanged a look and, with a sigh, waved a hand. A shimmering screen appeared before me, revealing the truth. My sister's insistence on a double wedding was a conspiracy. Felicity had been sleeping around and had already contracted an STD before her wedding. She had indeed consulted a master, but it was to plot against me. To secure a lifetime of good fortune for herself, she and the master devised a plan to swap her health with mine, using the fact we were born at the exact same moment. Wait! That man holding hands with Felicity as they walked into the temple, his arm around her. Wasn't that my husband? That bastard and that bitch. They were sleeping together before our wedding. I watched in horror as the screen showed the two of them carrying on an affair. Eventually, Felicity's husband caught her cheating and divorced her, leaving her with nothing. So Felicity married my husband instead. They had a beautiful child, and Felicity smoothly inherited my parents' entire fortune, becoming a wealthy socialite who got everything she ever wanted. The memory of my past life sent a cold dread through me. I stared at my dear sister. I wanted to grab the fruit knife from the coffee table and end her right there. But that would be too easy. Thank God I was reborn. This time, Felicity would pay for everything tenfold. And that scumbag I almost married wouldn't escape, either. I was grinding my teeth in hatred. Chloe? What's wrong? Seeing me lost in thought, Felicity frowned, worried I might have figured something out. She broke my trance, putting on a show. I know I'm adopted, she said, her voice trembling. Maybe I'm not worthy of getting married with you. But I've always thought of you as my real sister. I just wanted to share the happy occasion. If you think I'm not good enough, then I won't do it. Please don't be mad, Chloe. Just forget I said anything. Felicity's face crumpled into a pitiful expression. Just then, my mother walked out of her room. Seeing Felicity's act, her heart went out to her. She rushed over and pulled Felicity into a hug, then shot me a disapproving look. Chloe, Felicity means well. Getting married on the same day is a wonderful thing, a double blessing. And she's willing to share everything she prepared for her wedding with you. Why are you being so ungrateful? My mother, Sharon, stared at me with a frown, her mind already made up. That's settled. The day after tomorrow, you two will get married together. Felicity, nestled in my mother's arms, forced out a single tear. Mom, Chloe doesn't like me. She doesn't want to get married with me. I think I should just leave. Who dares make you leave? It's settled. The day after tomorrow, you're both getting married, Sharon said, protective as a mother hen. Terrified Felicity might suffer the slightest hurt. But Mom, don't you know? The little chick you're protecting is trying to kill your real daughter. From the safety of my mother's embrace, Felicity shot me a triumphant smirk. And another thing, my mother added. Since Felicity is preparing the wedding for you, you can't just contribute nothing. Transfer Felicity $200,000 for her trouble. She picked up my phone, unlocked it with my face, and prepared to make the transfer. Felicity's eyes were glued to the screen, a smug grin on her face. I feigned shock. $200,000? Mom, where would I get that kind of money? I waved my hands dismissively. You know what? Never mind. If it's going to cost that much, I'd rather not have a joint wedding. At that, Felicity panicked. Mom, Chloe is my sister. How could I, as her older sister, take her money? See, our Felicity is so sensible, my mother cooed, her gaze full of adoration for Felicity and disgust for me. Chloe, if you were half as thoughtful as your sister, your father and I wouldn't have to worry about you so much. I forced a smile. Well, thank you, sis. You're the best. In my past life, I was so moved that I actually transferred her my entire savings of $200,000. But now that I was reborn, she wasn't getting a dime. Mom, my sister and I are closer than real sisters, I said sweetly. We'll get married together the day after tomorrow. And as for the wedding preparations, please get me an identical set of everything you got for her, to her exact standards." Felicity's face went pale. She had spent $50,000 on her own wedding, most of her savings. Spending another $50,000 would wipe her out completely. She had planned on just picking up a cheap, second-hand dress for me and having me join her ceremony. It wouldn't have cost much. She turned to my mother for help. "Mom, I don't have that kind of money. Maybe you and Dad could." "Oh, Felicity, you know your father and I have all our money tied up in investments right now," my mother said dismissively. "I just remembered I have something to do. I have to go." It was clear my mother didn't love Felicity that much. Of course, she didn't love me much either. The only things she loved were herself and her reputation. As Sharon stood up and walked away, a flash of malice crossed Felicity's face before vanishing. The friendly, gentle mask was back in place. Her ability to switch faces so quickly was truly an art. She could have been an actress. "Don't worry, little sister," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll arrange everything just as you asked." She then retreated to her bedroom, closing the door and making a phone call. I could faintly hear the voice on the other end. It sounded familiar. Of course. It was my fiancé. I didn't dwell on it. I grabbed my bag and headed out, pretending to go shopping. In reality, I was going to see my childhood friend Alex. He ran a robotics company. "Alex," I said, getting straight to the point when I arrived at his office. "Can you build a robot that looks exactly like me?" He sized me up. "Sure. You have great proportions, not an ounce of fat. A photorealistic android will be quick to make. I can have it done by tomorrow night at the latest. For you, just the cost of materials. $20,000. Done." I transferred him the money without a second thought. After he made a 3D scan of me at his company, I went shopping for real, picking up a few things I might need. As a precaution, I bought a wedding dress identical to the one Felicity was preparing for me. Alex was fast. The next evening at 8 p.m., he called to tell me the android was ready. He had programmed it with my voice and mannerisms. Late that night, after everyone in the house was asleep, I snuck the robot into my bedroom. Inside my room was a secret chamber I had built on a whim, hidden from everyone. I never thought it would come in so handy. Tomorrow, the android would take my place at the wedding. I would hide in the secret room and come out after the ceremony was over. Just then, the little mouse in my secret room appeared again. In my last life, this female mouse had been born on the same day, month, and year as me. Thinking it was fate, I had been incredibly patient with it, feeding it the best mouse food until its fur was sleek and shiny. But I was just raising a monster. The mouse showed no gratitude. It just caused trouble, chewing up several of my custom-made dresses, leaving droppings in my tea, and hiding pins in my bed. My diamond jewelry would mysteriously vanish and reappear in its nest. The worst was when it got jealous of my sparkling eyes and scratched them, blinding me. This time, as I looked at the vicious little rodent, an idea formed. I went to a sewer and found several male mice infected with STDs. I put them in a cage with my little monster. 2 hours later, her belly was swollen. She was pregnant. And she stank. The disease had taken hold. I carefully placed the pregnant, diseased mouse inside the android's chest cavity and smiled. Let Felicity get married on the same day as this rat. This mouse was born on the same day and month as Felicity and me, just not the same year. I consulted 3 different mystics. They all said that with the ritual Felicity's own sorcerer was performing, there was a 70% chance of success. I had to take that bet. The next morning, the android, dressed in the bridal gown with a veil covering its face, sat waiting on my bed. From my secret room, I controlled its every move via my laptop. The one getting married to Felicity today wasn't me, it was that diseased, pregnant rat. Reborn with a heightened sense of caution, I had installed security cameras all over the house. On the monitor, I saw Felicity, dressed in an identical gown, tiptoeing to my door. "Chloe, hurry up. We're going to be late." "Coming," the robot replied, its voice a perfect imitation of mine. Its walk was identical too. It opened the door for Felicity. Felicity didn't suspect a thing. All she cared about was getting married at the exact same time as me to make the curse work. or rather, the android, was pushed into the wedding car. Halfway there, my fiancé Zach said he needed to use the restroom. The android's sensors could see and hear clearly up to 100 meters away. Sure enough, in a nearby grove of trees, Felicity and Zach were having a quick tryst. Zach was carefully holding an umbrella over them. My future sister-in-law is such a thrill seeker, he murmured. Felicity, after today, we can be together forever, he whispered. Felicity giggled, tracing a finger across his chest. Her face hardened into a snarl. Why does Chloe get to marry you, while I'm stuck with that hothead Chris? Why was she born with loving parents while mine died? After this wedding, everything that's hers will be mine. Watching this from my secret room, I just smiled. You can't tame a viper. It will always bite you back. The wedding went off without a hitch. Felicity and the diseased mouse were married at the exact same moment. That night, my new husband disappeared again. He claimed he had to work late at the office. A lie, of course. He was off to see Felicity. But I didn't care. The wedding was over. I retrieved the android, brought it back to my secret room, and activated the self-destruct sequence. It dissolved into thin air, as if it had never existed. As for the rat, I left it to its fate. After the wedding, Felicity announced she was pregnant. My parents' attention shifted entirely to her, and I became invisible. My biggest regret from my past life was not finishing my research project before those people destroyed me. I packed a small bag and moved to a research institute in the same city. My husband, Zach, was too busy with his affair with Felicity to even notice I was gone. I threw myself into my work at the institute, picking up where I left off. My parents never cared about my career. In their eyes, I was just a low-level employee. Time flew by. A month later, I needed to go home to get a book that was very important to me. I was curious to see how Felicity was doing. As soon as I walked in the door, I saw her. She was sprawled on the sofa like a beached whale, her skin a grayish color, and covered in a fine layer of fuzz. She had even sprouted whiskers on either side of her mouth. She was cracking nuts with her teeth, scattering shells all over the floor. She was so fat she was unrecognizable, having ballooned from 90 pounds to nearly 300. At first glance, she looked like a giant pig rooting around on the couch. Felicity reached out a chubby hand, grabbed a handful of raw rice from the table, and shoved it into her mouth. In a few moments, she had eaten half a bag. My mother was in the kitchen, happily slaving away, cooking a massive pot of pork knuckles for her. Felicity, eat up. Mom made you 10 pork knuckles. My mom and dad carried a huge basin of them over to the coffee table. Felicity grabbed one in each hand and started gnawing on them. In less than 5 minutes, they were gone. My dad, beaming with a rare smile, watched her eat. That's it, Felicity, eat up. My 5 grandbabies need to grow big and strong, he said, handing her 2 more. I had a master look into it. Quintuplets are a sign of great fortune. The company's stock is going to soar. Felicity, you're the hero of this family. My mother was grinning from ear to ear. At 300 pounds, Felicity could barely move. She had to heave her massive belly around on the sofa. Just lifting her 60-pound arms to take the pork knuckles from my dad left her breathless. Zach stood nearby, looking utterly disgusted. He held his nose with one hand and sprayed air freshener with the other. Of course she stank, the curse had worked. She had the health of a diseased rat. Felicity puckered her lips and motioned for Zach to kiss her. Zach looked at her misshapen, stinking form with revulsion but leaned in anyway. A second later, he shoved her away. Did you just crap yourself? You reek. Slap. Felicity smacked him across the face. How dare you? You're just a freeloader who married into this family. You're nothing but a gold digger. Piss me off again, and I'll kick you to the curb. Zach's face darkened, a murderous look flashing in his eyes before he quickly concealed it. He had noticed me standing in the doorway. His eyes lit up. He couldn't believe my body and face were still as perfect as they were before the wedding, while the woman lay on the sofa was a grotesque parody of her former self. Felicity noticed me too. Seeing my slim, 90-pound figure, her eyes filled with jealousy. Her gaze then fell to my flat stomach, and she smirked, smugly stroking her own pregnant belly. Well, little sister, she gloated. I'm pregnant with quintuplets. We got married at the same time. How come your stomach is still so flat? Quintuplets? Congratulations, sis. You're clearly the lucky one in this family. Seeing the changes in her body, I couldn't help but smile. The curse had worked. I had won my bet. My flattery made her even more arrogant. She pulled a small red booklet from the sofa cushions. Chloe, Zach and I are legally married now. You don't mind, do you? Of course not, I said with a dazzling smile. You're my older sister. Whatever you do is right. Why would I mind? I wanted to set off fireworks to celebrate you two scumbags being permanently chained together. Good thing we never got around to signing the marriage license. They had insisted the ceremony was what mattered, not some piece of paper. It was all part of their plan. Zach never intended to legally marry me at all. My mother smiled. It's good that you sisters are getting along. Oh, Felicity, you're pregnant. Why are you wearing so little? She rushed to her room to get Felicity more clothes. I went to my own room to get my book. I wasn't planning on staying long. When I opened the door, I froze. My old room had been converted into a nursery, filled with baby furniture. Fortunately, the few books on my shelf hadn't been cleared out yet. I grabbed the one I needed and glanced around the room one last time without a trace of nostalgia. As I was about to leave, I heard my mother on the phone in the next room. When we were little, my parents had replaced the wall between our rooms with a thin wooden partition, so I wouldn't be scared sleeping alone. You're a greedy bastard. My mother yelled into the phone. I already gave you $20,000 a month ago. Now you want another 10? Not a chance. A month ago? $20,000? That was right around the time of the double wedding. The person on the other end said something, and my mother's tone changed. Fine. As long as you never tell anyone I hired you to swap their health, I'll give you another $10,000. This is the last time. If you ever try to threaten me with this again, I'll make you regret it. My mind went blank. It felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I never imagined it was my own mother who had paid the sorcerer. I thought she just favored Felicity. I never dreamed she was this depraved. I composed myself, put the book in my bag, and walked out of the bedroom. I was about to leave the house, but as I passed the living room, Felicity called out to me. Sister, when I have the baby shower, you have to be there for your little niece or nephew, okay? I just nodded with a serene smile. Given her current condition, it was a miracle if she even survived childbirth. Seeing how calm I was, Felicity scowled. She grabbed Zach's arm and pulled him into a hug, her eyes filled with defiance. We're the real couple. But what did that have to do with me? Just then, I noticed a smattering of small red dots on Zach's neck. I almost laughed out loud. Payback was coming for the scumbag. Zach, disgusted, quickly pulled away from Felicity. Yes, you're only a real couple once you have the license, I said calmly. Our ceremony didn't count for anything. Zach frowned, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. But isn't this what he wanted? My words seemed to please my sister. Ever since we were kids, she loved taking my things. My favorite pencil case would disappear, only to show up in her backpack. My favorite dress would be found the next day, slashed with scissors and unwearable. And now Zach, the man I'd had a crush on since high school, was legally hers. Good. Now they were truly locked together. I left with my precious book. Only 3 days later, my mother called. Felicity was in labor, but there were complications. She was at the hospital and wanted me to come. I did want to see how this played out. When I got to the hospital, my parents, Zach, and his parents were all waiting anxiously outside the delivery room. As soon as my mother saw me, she grabbed onto me like a lifeline. Chloe, you have to save Felicity. She's hemorrhaging. They need to give her a transfusion with your blood. Mom, calm down. The hospital has a blood bank. They have all the common blood types. The doctors can handle it, I said, trying to soothe her. But my mother just stammered, Chloe. The doctor said her situation is special. Only blood from a close relative will work. Please, you have to save her. I was completely baffled. Mom, did you forget? Felicity is adopted. We're not blood relatives. I can't help her. Just go get your blood tested. Maybe there'll be a miracle. Please, Mom is begging you. I stared at my mother's frantic, unhinged state, at a loss for words. Just then a doctor ran over. Which one of you is Sharon? I am. My mother cried, rushing forward. Your blood is a match. We need to start the transfusion immediately, or the patient's life is in danger. Without a second's hesitation, my mother ran off with the doctor. Felicity was saved. But my father and I were left utterly confused. Half an hour later, the surgery was over. A doctor came out carrying 5 babies. Everyone's faces lit up, and they surged forward to greet their 5 lucky grandchildren. But as they got closer, their expressions turned to horror. They weren't 5 babies. They were 5 rats with human mouths. Felicity had given birth to monsters. Zach screamed and collapsed to the floor. My father, seeing his 5 grandsons were actually 5 monstrosities, clutched his chest. He had been counting on them to make his company's stock price jump. He'd even arranged for the media to be waiting outside the hospital. Sure enough, the news that Felicity had given birth to 5 monsters spread like wildfire. Within minutes, my father's company stock plummeted. Enraged, my dad snatched the 5 creatures and strangled them on the spot. A doctor in a mask came rushing out, furious. The patient has an STD. Why didn't you tell us sooner? You nearly infected our entire staff. Luckily, we caught it in time. What? My father roared. When they wheeled Felicity out, Zach and my parents recoiled, covering their noses and mouths and keeping their distance. Felicity's mother-in-law was mortified. We're getting a divorce. This is absolutely a divorce. Our family has had the worst luck, marrying a thing like this. Zach had been fed up for a long time and was eager to get out. Felicity, I'm divorcing you. You cheated on me, got an STD, and gave birth to 5 monsters. You bitch. Just like in my past life, Felicity looked to my parents for help. But they were too ashamed and just wanted to cut all ties with her. Felicity, however, refused to sign the divorce papers. Her in-laws, disgusted, didn't even stay to help her through her postpartum recovery. They went home and told all their neighbors and relatives that their daughter-in-law and grandchildren had died in childbirth. Zach looked at the diseased woman lying in the hospital bed and felt a wave of nausea. Then he remembered all the times he'd slept with her. His face turned pale. He rushed to get himself tested. He came back with the report, walked up to Felicity's bed, and slapped her hard across the face. You infected me, you bitch. Thank God you got so fat and disgusting that I haven't touched you in a month. At least it's treatable with medication. You dare hit me, you freeloader? Hearing that, a murderous rage filled Zach's eyes. It was like she had struck a nerve. He lunged forward and wrapped his hands around her throat. You think you're some kind of prize? The only reason I was willing to marry into your family was for the money. Now that your adoptive parents have abandoned you, what use are you to me? Felicity's eyes bulged in disbelief. Not wanting a murder on their hands, my parents pulled Zach away. The 3 of them went aside to whisper about something. When they returned, Zach's attitude had done a complete 180. He looked at Felicity with gentle eyes, promising to help her get treatment for her disease, and saying they could have another baby once she was better. Felicity was moved to tears, promising to be a good wife to him. My parents rented an apartment for them and had them move out. They canceled the credit cards they had given her and told everyone their adopted daughter had run off to find her birth parents and never came back. My father was arrested for killing the 5 creatures in the hospital. Since they weren't technically human, he avoided a murder charge but was sentenced to 3 years in prison for what was considered partial homicide. I went back to the research institute and continued my work. This time, I was even more dedicated than in my past life. Every waking moment not spent eating or sleeping was dedicated to my research. The book I had retrieved from home was my old research journal, which helped me break through one barrier after another. I became a top scientist. The next time I heard news of my sister was 3 years later. I had gone home to handle some residency paperwork and ran into Chris, the man who was almost her husband. He told me the whole story. My parents, ashamed of Felicity, had waited until Zach had cured her STD. Then the 3 of them conspired to sell her to northern Myanmar, making another profit. Felicity's fate mirrored my own from my past life. She was abused by dozens of men. But somehow she managed to escape. The first thing she did when she returned was kill my mother and Zach. The second thing she did was try to kill me. But before she could get to me, the cops arrested her. She was sentenced to life in prison. Before they took her away, she insisted on seeing me. I was curious to see what had become of her, so I went. When I saw her, the excess flesh on her body was still just as unsightly. Her skin was still gray and covered in fine hair. She looked like a rat demon. The only difference from 3 years ago were the new and old scars covering her arms and face. The moment she saw me, her face contorted with rage. "You bitch. Why are you still alive? You're the one who should have gone to northern Myanmar." She started screaming hysterically, slamming her hands against the glass partition between us, as if she wanted to devour me whole. The guards had to tase her to get her to calm down. It seemed Felicity had been reborn too. She just came back a little later than I did. 2 minutes later, she regained consciousness. Seeing me, she was still agitated. "Wait. Why didn't you get the disease?" I know I swapped my health with yours." "That's right," I interrupted her softly. "But the person who got married on the same day as you wasn't me. It was a pregnant, diseased rat." "What? A rat?" "Then the quintuplets I gave birth to. Those monsters." Her eyes widened in horror as the truth dawned on her. "You bitch. Why didn't you just die?" Her face was a mask of pure fury. She clawed at the glass partition, leaving deep scratches. How did you know? Don't tell me, you were reborn too?" It was the only possibility she could think of. I just watched her meltdown with a calm expression. Felicity stared at me, then slumped back in her chair, defeated. "I should have known. You were reborn too." Suddenly a wild, manic laugh escaped her lips. "If I can be reborn once, I can be reborn a second time. You just wait. Everything you have will be mine sooner or later." "Oh, but my dear sister, I couldn't let you die so easily." After the visit, I made some calls and pulled some strings. I made sure the people inside would take good care of my dear sister. They were to use every instrument of torture on her, but give her just enough medical treatment to keep her alive. I wouldn't let her have an easy death. I continued my research and my reputation grew. One day, after an interview, I was walking home when I saw a man with graying hair standing at the entrance to my apartment complex. He looked weathered and exhausted, his eyes clouded, his skin rough. A long, ugly scar ran down his face. He was so thin and frail that he stood hunched over, looking like a strong gust of wind could blow him away. His cloudy eyes radiated a strange kindness, and he was looking right at me. I slowed down on my guard. But as I got closer, I saw it. His features were unmistakably like my father's. "Chloe? Is that you?" The voice confirmed it. It was my father, just released from prison. I nodded and continued walking toward my building. "Chloe, wait." He called out. "Can you ever forgive your father?" I turned and looked at him. Forgive him for what? I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked into the building. The moment he sold me to northern Myanmar, he stopped being my father. As he watched me walk away, his eyes filled with tears. Crash. A flower pot fell from a high floor and smashed onto his head, killing him instantly. I looked up in the direction the pot had fallen from. It was my sister. She had escaped again. But it wasn't long before the police had her surrounded. This time, she was just babbling incoherently about being reborn and changing her destiny. In the end, they locked her away in a psychiatric hospital. She was subjected to daily electroshock therapy. I paid the staff to take good care of her, to make sure she suffered as much as possible. Eventually, Felicity's mind really did break. She started self-harming, gouging out her own eyes, breaking her own legs. She would rant to anyone who would listen that she was a reincarnator, destined to become a billionaire. Each time, she would be given another round of shock therapy or a heavy sedative. And so the days passed, one after another. As for me, I rented a small house by the sea. In my spare time, I plant flowers on my balcony, or I open my window and look out at the ocean and the beach. At 4 a.m., I watched the sunrise over the water. It was beautiful, just like my new life. The end. Sharon's story. I have 2 biological daughters, Felicity and Chloe. They're twins, but they don't have the same father. Felicity is my daughter with my childhood sweetheart. To be fair, Chloe is my husband David's child. I didn't want my affair to be exposed, So I had my childhood sweetheart take Felicity to be raised in the countryside. But to make it up to her, I started to form a plan. When Felicity was 5, I arranged a car accident that killed my old flame and his new lover. Then I brought Felicity back from the countryside to live with Chloe. I sent her to the best private schools, paid for her to study abroad. I was so afraid she would suffer that I even secretly gave her $2 million behind David's back. But Felicity was young and reckless. She was always chasing thrills and ended up with an STD at a young age. Chloe was always so responsible, always doing chores. I made her get part-time jobs for her own good. But the gap between the two girls grew. Chloe was always at the top of her class, a star among her peers, while Felicity was always at the bottom. I just wanted to even things out, to give some of what Chloe had to Felicity. When Felicity liked Chloe's fiancé, I helped her get him. When Felicity got sick, Chloe, as her younger sister, should have borne some of the burden. So I paid a sorcerer $20,000 to swap their health. That way, my Felicity could marry Zach in perfect health. Chloe was too outstanding. She got good grades, won all sorts of awards. I always thought, if only I could give some of Chloe's achievements to Felicity. If it had been the other way around, if Felicity had been the brilliant one and Chloe the failure, I'm sure I would have given some of Felicity's honors to Chloe. But I never, ever imagined that my precious daughter Felicity would be the one to stab me to death. I just don't understand. Everything I did for my children. I pleaded my case before the king of hell, but he flew into a rage. He called me unfit to be a mother, said I got what I deserved, and cast me down into the 18th level of hell. The end.